And we start with the Fox News alert. Iran targeting us. The radical Islamic mullahs of Tehran who hate America blame for the increasing number of attacks against our troops in the Middle East. Our brave men and women now being injured. That after Iranian ballistic missiles and rockets hit the Al-Assad air base in Iraq. Proxy groups backed by Iran blame for this. Central Command says a number of the U.S. personnel now being evaluated for traumatic brain injuries. It was one of the largest attacks, they say, on our troops since the Israeli-Hamas war began. Some are calling for President Biden to do what Ronald Reagan did, take the action against the Iranians directly as payback. Hello and welcome to Fox News Live. I'm Eric Shawn. Hi, Arthel.
Hi, Eric. Hello, everyone. I'm Arthel Neville. Now, there have been at least 142 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria over the last 3 months. U.S. Central Command says damage assessments on that base in Iraq are ongoing, but that most of the missiles were intercepted.
Fox News team coverage for you. Fox News strategic analyst General Jack Keane standing by. He will tell us what the administration needs to do to stop this. But first, let's go to Lucas Tomlinson live in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. That's where the president has been spending this weekend. Lucas?
And Eric, attack number 142 against U.S. forces inside Iraq has been the largest yet in this conflict. As you mentioned, ballistic missiles being fired from western Iraq by Iran's proxy groups targeting air base used by American forces. At least 2 soldiers were injured. And this comes as a $32 million Reaper drone was blown out of the sky late last week. That's the second time this has happened since early November. And of course, this ballistic missile attack has the attention of the Biden administration.
It was a very serious attack using a capability, ballistic missiles that pose a genuine threat. Through the skill of U.S. forces, many, if not most, of those missiles were shot down before they impacted the base, but some of them got through.
And here's from U.S. Central Command. At approximately 6:30 p.m. last night, Baghdad time, multiple ballistic missiles and rockets were launched by Iranian-backed militants in western Iraq, targeting the Al-Assad air base. Most of the missiles were intercepted by the base's air defense systems, while others impacted the base. Damage assessments are ongoing. A number of U.S. personnel are undergoing evaluation for traumatic brain injuries. At least 1 Iraqi service member was wounded. And U.S. officials tell me, Eric, that at least 15 Patriot interceptors were fired at those incoming ballistic missiles. 2 slipped through. 2 American soldiers were wounded. Senator Tim Scott says, quote, "These attacks on our troops and assets need to stop now. Every dollar President Biden has released to Iran has gone through endangering the lives of our service members and allies. It's time for the Biden administration to step up and address the threat from Iran seriously and immediately." And yesterday, U.S. forces launched another round of airstrikes from the deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower using Super Hornets like this, targeting Iran's rebel army in Yemen. Now, this morning here in Delaware, President Biden went out for breakfast at Rehoboth Beach. He did not speak to reporters who wanted to know about what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah, and what the administration will do about it. Lucas, thank you. Arthel?
All right, Eric and Lucas, thank you. More on this now. Let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired U.S. Army General Jack Keane. All right, General, let's jump in here. A serious tactical missile attack with more than 15 U.S. Patriot missiles launched to intercept. What does the escalation and sophistication levels indicate to you, General?
Well, certainly Iran is responding to the fact that we are really taking on the Houthis. We're beginning to conduct a sustained campaign against the Houthis, which needs to be done. 2 things. 1, conduct that sustained campaign to take down all of their capabilities, which is finite. I mean, they just have X amount of rockets and missiles and Y amount of radars and command and control systems. These are things that we can get after comprehensively and stop the transshipments as well, whether they're going by sea or by air. We have to have just as much of an aggressive campaign to do that. The Iranians are reacting to that. I think we have to draw back a little bit here, Arthel, and think about the strategy we have with the Iranians. This administration started out diplomatically trying to negotiate with Iran to achieve stability in the Middle East. And that has not worked. The Obama administration did much the same thing with the nuclear deal. If you remember, the major clause in the nuclear deal was 15 years into it, they could have nuclear weapons. That's 2030. But the premise behind that was if you treated Iran as a member of the international community respectfully, it would likely curb their malign behavior in the Middle East. And if they acquired a nuclear weapon, they would be a responsible nation. Does anybody on this planet now, looking at that, believe that that was ever possible? That has blown up literally in our face. And we've got to recognize that there are not negotiated appeasement solutions with the Iranians. They have upped their game, increased the capabilities of all the proxies in the region in these ensuing years of the negotiated nuclear deal. Secondly, we've got to recognize economically that we need to isolate Iran. This administration pulled back on the Trump administration sanctions. Why? To convince the Iranians that we were serious about renegotiating the nuclear deal. That has blown up in our face as well. We've got to get with the other nations, go back to maximum sanctions, isolate Iran economically. They are not paying a price for any of this. They're flush with money because we've removed those sanctions. They have the capability to resupply and energize these proxies, which they are doing, and I think doing rather successfully. And then third is the military aspect of this. It's a failed strategy to believe that we cannot attack Iran's capabilities, which are supporting the Houthis, supporting Hamas, supporting Hezbollah, supporting the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. And that would lead to all-out war with the Iranians. The Iranians want no war with the United States because they lose their regime. So therefore, we can escalate and at least begin with attacking the IRGC capabilities, which are fueling this war in terms of direction and in terms of training. I mean, the Houthis were just recently at the training center, receiving training on these capabilities they're using right now to shut down the global supply chain. Let's take that on in a measured way. It's not going to lead to all-out war. Will the Iranians respond? Of course they will. But eventually that escalation will stop. It will not lead to an all-out war. That is the fear the administration has that paralyzes them from dealing with Iran directly.
Well, you laid out a lot of really great points as usual, General. Here you're saying documentation, diplomacy is not going to work. Basically, you punch that bully right in the nose, and you feel that the Biden administration is afraid of doing that because they fear further escalation. And you're saying that's not going to happen. Go get it done, and that's how you're going to stop Iran. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Pretty much so, and I think there's evidence to support that. Reagan did this in the late 1980s over a similar issue. The Iranians were interfering with the traffic of Persian Gulf oil out of the Middle East. We were escorting it, and they were taking us on, and we took down their oil platforms and their capabilities and their patrol boats and naval bases to inflict that intervention. And as a result of that, they shut down. President Trump made a decision to go after IRGC leadership, namely the guy in charge, Qasem Soleimani. And did they attack after that? Yes. But then they eventually shut down. I think the evidence is there. Iran does not want a war with the United States, and we have to have a comprehensive strategy. It's not just military. We got to recognize that appeasement is no longer a viable road here, and we've got to bring in our allies and partners to isolate Iran, both diplomatically, also economically, and deal with them militarily as well.
And the allies and partners are on board with this, whatever the U.S. may call to say as the correct strategy, and especially if they use the aggression that you talked about, that would ultimately deter them and scare them away from their aggression. Do you think the allies are on board with that?
They would take some discussing with them because they have some of the same stripes that this administration has. They lack the spine to deal directly with Iran. And that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But you put the facts and the case out there. I mean, I think it's quite compelling. And many of them, I think, could be persuaded to step forward. After all, we do have 12 nations involved in the multinational force trying to protect global shipping through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. So that already is a start, having some nations participating in that. Let's take the next step and isolate Iran diplomatically and also economically.
And I have to throw this out there because we have an election coming up in however many months now, 10 months now. And I'd imagine that that has to be on the mind of the administration to not get the U.S. into a further, more broad spread war, because you had pointed out to me last time, you said, Arthel, we are at war when I asked you that question. But the administration is concerned about spreading this further, given what's happening in November. If you can comment on that in 30 seconds, because they're telling me I really have to go. Please.
No, elections are part of the fabric of American life, and the world out there has exploded before, during, and after elections, and national leaders have to deal with that despite the elections that they're facing. That's the reality. We can't call the shots in the world out there. The events happen, they take place, and we still have elections that leaders have to face. We've got to be able to do both. Deal with the world out there and pursue your own political goals.
General Jack Keane, thank you.
Great talking to you, Arthel.
And speaking of elections, here at home, all eyes are on New Hampshire. You know, it's 48 hours to go until the first in the nation primary. The three top polling Republicans out-stumping for last-minute votes, except for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He is spending most of this weekend in South Carolina, where he's focusing on that primary next month. Former President Trump is polling way ahead of his challengers, looking to win New Hampshire and build on his lead. Meanwhile, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, well, she still hopes to sway some last-minute deciders, especially those undeclared voters in New Hampshire, who are the largest voting bloc in the Granite State. But take a look at the new daily tracking poll. It shows her losing ground to the former president. And DeSantis, well, he trails them both in a distant third place. Karl Rove is here straight ahead with his analysis on this. But first, Fox is live across the snowy state whose motto is live free or die. Madison Alworth following the DeSantis campaign. Brian Yennis on the trail with Nikki Haley. Let's begin with Alexis McAdams, who's live in Manchester, where the former president just rallied, last night. And guess what? He had some top Republican elected officials from South Carolina. Alexis, talk about putting it in Nikki Haley's face. Wow.
Hey, Eric, that's right. He did have some special guests on that stage, really going after his competitors and showing that he has a lot of support across the country, not just here in New Hampshire. And Eric, it is another very bitterly cold day here in the Granite State, but that didn't stop those Trump supporters from waiting outside for hours, just so they could hear the former president. And he went after his competition, saying they have no shot. Watch.
In short, if you want a losing candidate who puts America last, vote for either one of them, Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis.
But both of those candidates, Eric, have pushed back, saying they are doing just fine and are not worried about Trump's criticism. But take a look. Trump's holding a 50% support right now among likely Republican primary voters, according to this morning's CNN UNH poll here. So while his closest competitor there, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, is standing at 39%, and DeSantis is trailing in a distant third. Last night, the former president on stage at the Southern New Hampshire University Arena, he talked for about 2 hours, focusing in on how he says he would secure the border and improve the economy. Trump says his competition is not doing well, and the latest polls do show he has a commanding lead. So going back to that UNH poll, you can look there and see among New Hampshire's registered Republican voters, Eric, Trump is by far the favorite. He's at 67%. But look at this. Haley's doing much better amongst undeclared voters. In this poll, 58% see her as their top choice, and undeclared voters make up the largest voting group in New Hampshire and have been in a source of debate on the trail. Listen.
They're not going to win anyway. They're not going to win anyway. They're not even close. But they're going to load it up with Democrats and independents. We love Democrats that want to vote for us, and we love independents especially that want to vote for us. But it's not what the party is about.
And how do we know that we're so close to the primary here in New Hampshire, Eric? Well, it's easy. You just turn on the local television station and all you see are campaign attack ads and flyers all over the place. So people here can feel it, and they are expecting record voter turnout on Tuesday, Eric.
All right, Alexis, at a very picturesque Merrimack River right there in Manchester. Thank you.
That's right. It's gorgeous, gorgeous. All right. Well, meanwhile, a change of plans for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He was to campaign in South Carolina all weekend, but decided to cut that short and head to New Hampshire. The new travel schedule forced him to cancel some Sunday morning TV appearances. Madison Allworth is live in Manchester with more. Hey, Madison.
Hi, Arthel. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is running a distant third here in New Hampshire, but he does have a lot of attention on him today after abruptly canceling appearances on 3 major television networks that were all set to air this Sunday morning, canceling appearances on NBC, CNN, and right here on Fox, raising eyebrows everywhere and leading some to openly wonder what this means for the future of his campaign due to poor polling numbers. His press secretary, however, posted this within an hour of the news breaking on X, saying, quote, "The media hits were canceled due to a scheduling issue and will be rescheduled. The governor will be traveling Sunday morning with the campaign and has public events scheduled Sunday evening through Tuesday in New Hampshire." Now, DeSantis had initially planned to be in South Carolina all weekend, but will now be making an appearance here in Manchester tonight at 5 p.m. DeSantis held 3 events in South Carolina yesterday. While he was in Myrtle Beach, DeSantis was asked directly whether his South Carolina trip was a sign that he didn't think he could earn any delegates in New Hampshire. Here's what he had to say.
We're doing what we think we need to do to accumulate delegates. I think that just making it clear that we've got a good foothold here.
His foothold in New Hampshire less strong, currently polling at 6%. But supporters like Congressman Thomas Massie telling Fox News Sunday that's nothing to worry about.
Well, you know, we never had high expectations for New Hampshire anyway. I'll be going to New Hampshire later today, but the real fight, I think, is in South Carolina, and that's where Nikki Haley, I think, stumbles. She's going to miss expectations and not even win her own state.
His campaign saying that DeSantis will now be here through the primary on Tuesday. He's going to talk to voters tonight at the Farm Bar and Grill at 5 p.m. I'll send it back to you.
I'll take it back here, Madison Allworth. Thank you very much. Eric.
With her right now, Nikki Haley. Well, she is on her way to her second of 6 scheduled campaign stops today in the state. She just spoke with voters a few moments ago at Mary Ann's Diner in Derry. Later today, she will be joined on the road by New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who's endorsed her. He will try to help her win over voters. Haley also earning the endorsement today of 2 of the state's major local newspapers who are backing her for president. Brian Yennis at Mary Ann's Diner. We're getting a sense of the local views of Miss Haley. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Eric, we are actually at the middle school where former Governor Nikki Haley just wrapped up one of those 6 events she has today. Nobody has spent more time in New Hampshire than former Governor Nikki Haley. In fact, her rivals have 1 campaign stop each today in New Hampshire. She has 6. She had about 150 people here at the middle school for this event that wrapped up about a half hour ago. And she'll end her day today with a rally alongside TV's very own Judge Judy, who has endorsed her. Haley has spent nearly $30 million on TV ads in the Granite State, more than double Trump and nearly quadruple DeSantis. The campaign debuted a new 3-minute ad airing in New Hampshire on Monday, the day before the election, featuring an endorsement by the mother of Otto Warmbier, who died in 2017 after being taken hostage by North Korea. Warmbier describes how Haley encouraged her to stand up to North Korea and demand justice for her son. Yesterday, Haley attacked former President Donald Trump for cozying up to dictators.
You know what Trump did? Because she would call me or she would text me. She was so upset because he would talk about the love letters he had with Kim Jong-un. He would talk about the fact that he didn't really think that Kim Jong-un knew about the torture because Kim told him that. When the world is on fire, you want to talk about a contrast in foreign policy? You don't befriend dictators and thugs who want to kill us.
Today, Haley received the endorsement of the Boston Globe editorial board, the paper encouraging independent voters who normally would be inclined to participate in the Democratic primary, which is not competitive this year, to vote in the Republican. Quote, for independent voters who can cast a ballot in either party's primary, this ought to be the easiest call in a generation. Your vote is going to matter a lot more in the Republican race, and you have an opportunity to help save the country from the alarming prospect of a second Donald Trump presidency. New Hampshire does allow independent or undeclared voters to vote in the Republican primary. Registered Democrats are not allowed to vote in that primary. They are expecting record turnout on Tuesday.
Thanks so much. Arthel?
Eric, a tragedy in the Rio Grande, Texas there. Another migrant has drowned while trying to get into the United States. We have a live report that's coming up next. Tragedy at the southern border. The Texas Department of Public Safety reports finding the body of an illegal immigrant who drowned apparently while trying to cross the Rio Grande River. It is at least the fourth migrant drowning in just over a week, and it comes as a bipartisan group of lawmakers led by Texas Congressman Michael McFaul tours the border this weekend. Dana Marie McNichols is live in Eagle Pass, Texas. So, Dana Marie, what more can you tell us?
Arthel, well, you can see behind me a dangerous and shallow part of the Rio Grande where tens of thousands of migrants cross monthly over into the U.S. You can also see that razor wire lining the river as a clear deterrent. Eyewitness Texas military telling migrants don't cross. The current is strong, but many still make that attempt. And photos you're about Rio Grande. Yesterday, though, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul and members of Congress took a tour of the Rio Grande on boats to see where migrants are crossing illegally. After each one spoke at a press conference, they were visibly frustrated with the current state of the border operations.
There were 3.1 million people that came to the border. 2.5 border encounters, 600,000 getaway, that's 3.5. And then about 1.5 got allowed to come in one way or the other into the U.S., and that's not acceptable. The system cannot take this.
Now, Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar emphasized that both Republicans and Democrats need to work together on this crisis to see change.
We need to go back to the policies at work and get this thing done. 8 million encounters. No legal status. How in the world are we going to deal with this? 300 on the terror watch list.
And another topic discussed was drug smuggling from Mexico into the United States. Now, McCaul, as well as the other congressional group, they're going to be traveling to Mexico City today to meet with President Obrador and other Mexican officials to talk about how they can stop the influx of fentanyl coming into the U.S. Arthel.
Yeah, and of course, we will cover Congressman McCaul and fellow lawmakers' next trip to the border as well. Dana Marie McNichol reporting live from Eagle Pass, Texas. Thank you. Eric?
So, how can the country really put a stop to this influx? Joining us now is Congressman Pat Fallon. He's a Republican from Texas, serves on the Armed Services and Oversight Committees. You know, Congressman, the drowning is another tragic reminder of the human cost of this crisis. Can the two parties work together to finally end this? What do you want to see?
Eric, thanks for having me on. You know, listen, I really hope that we can, because we really have to. I mean, what we've seen in this administration for the last 3 years is a massive explosion of migrant crossings on our southern border. And the data shows this. Under President Obama, in his first 34 months, there was about 1.5 million illegal encounters. And under President Trump, it was the same, almost the same number, a little bit larger. But under Joe Biden, it was nearly 8 million in his first 34 months. And it's about 8.5 million now. So we really have to. The number one thing, I was just at the border 2 weeks ago, and the number one thing that we asked Border Patrol agents was, if there was one singular thing we could do, what would that be to really change things? And they said, reinstitute Wait in Mexico, which is where migrants claiming asylum, which nearly all of them do now, will wait in Mexico while their case is adjudicated. They said that agents, and they should know, said that what we've seen in this crossings would be reduced by 70% with just doing that one thing.
Wow. Why isn't that being done?
Well, that's just it. I mean, Joe Biden has wide executive authority to fix this immediately. He really can. He could institute Wait in Mexico right now. He could also, if you really look at the laws, he could stop migration from any particular country if he so chooses. He has that authority. He's just choosing not to use it, which I think he's catering, unfortunately, to his extreme left, which doesn't serve anyone well. And what we've seen politically is if they don't fix this, he's going to lose the election in November. Along the southern border in Texas, most folks that live there are of Hispanic extraction. Overwhelmingly, they are now leaving the Democratic Party in droves and becoming Republicans. We have 2 Republican Congress members from the border that are Republicans in traditional Democratic areas. And we had Mayra Flores. At one time, we had 3. So, they better fix it or they're going to pay a price at the polls.
Boy, talk about the Hispanic and Republicans. What do you think the far left and some of the progressives would do to the president if he enacted what you're calling for?
Well, you know what? They got really no other choice. I mean, I think he should, if it were somebody that's a little bit more, a lot more political savvy, like a Barack Obama or a Bill Clinton on the Democratic side, they never would have let it get this bad. But Joe Biden, I think he's a shadow of his former self. I do think he's suffering from, he doesn't have the mental acuity he once had. I mean, again, look at the numbers. These are record profits from the drug cartels. I mean, Eric, we had on the last 2 years under President Trump, we caught 3 people.
You know, this could be solved. What would you say to that?
I'd say, you know what the president's doing is, first of all, it's distraction. Because think about a spigot, and we want to stop the flood, really, of illegal migrants. What the president's approach is just more buckets. He wants more immigration judges to give out more migrants to adjudicate their asylum claims, to have them come into the country. He wants more Border Patrol agents, but he's not letting the Border Patrol agents enforce the law. They're merely processing. So why don't we turn off the spigot? The one way to do that, again, is wait in Mexico policy, redefine what credible fear is, institute E-Verify. That would be something that would work. How about building walls and barriers? That also works. And expedited removal, because if a person comes all the way, say, from Ecuador, and when they get to the United States border, they're told to wait in Mexico, they're going to call home and say, this sucked. It was very dangerous. It was very costly. And now I can't even get in anyway. So the folks that follow won't come at all.
All right, got one more for you. It's a doozy. It comes from Dan Pfeiffer, former advisor to President Obama, writing in the message. He says this. He says, quote, in an article, the Republicans actually want a border crisis. They want a crisis at the border to help them in the election. The Republicans see the border as a huge political vulnerability for President Biden. The Republicans would rather have a crisis to exploit than actual solution. 20 seconds. What's your answer to him?
Hey, he's half right. It is a complete disaster politically for Joe Biden, but we want the border fixed. I mean, I love this country. I want this country to thrive. I want it to succeed. There's 3.8 million people in the world waiting to come to this country legally, respecting the laws and the rules of the country that they want to become a part of.
All right.
So, yes, I would love it fixed.
The computer's cutting us off. Pat Fallon, Republican of Texas. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks, Terry.
Đấy, các bạn chỉ mute cái phần này cho nó thẳng hay giúp mình nha. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ mở cái phần giấy này ra lại này. Đấy, sau đó các bạn sẽ lật ngang qua theo thế này cho mình. Đấy, các bạn sẽ tiếp tục gấp lại thêm một lần nữa. Đó, vẫn là hai cái phần giấy này. Rồi bên này nó sẽ trùng lại với nhau nha. Đấy. Các bạn sẽ gấp lại như thế này. Rồi các bạn sẽ miết cái phần giấy này lại cho mình nha. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Rồi cho các bạn sẽ mở ra lại này. Thì bước tiếp theo các bạn sẽ để cái tờ giấy nó nằm như thế này cho mình nha. Các bạn sẽ thực hiện để gấp vào. Đây, các bạn sẽ gấp phần giấy này vào. Sẽ cho hai cái phần đỉnh này. Đấy, sẽ cho hai cái phần đỉnh này. Nó sẽ trùng lại với nhau nha các bạn. Hai phần đỉnh này. Đấy, các bạn sẽ gấp lại như thế này. Sau đó thì các bạn sẽ miết cái phần giấy này lại cho mình nha. Bạn sẽ miết lại. Đây, bạn sẽ miết cái phần giấy này cho thẳng này giúp mình. Miết lại nha các bạn. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Thì tiếp theo các bạn sẽ mở cái phần giấy này ra lại nè. Đây, mở ra lại. Đây. Các bạn sẽ tiếp tục là gấp đôi cái phần giấy này vào. Đây. Bạn sẽ gấp phần giấy này vào về hai cái phần đỉnh này, nó sẽ trùng với nhau nha. Đấy, như này. Về các bạn sẽ miết cái phần giấy này lại cho mình. Đây, như thế này nha các bạn. Đấy. Về bước tiếp theo, sau khi các bạn đã gấp những cái bước gấp giống như mình thì cái tờ giấy của bạn này có những cái đường nếp như thế này. Đây, những cái nếp như thế này nha. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ để cái tờ giấy như thế này lên trên bàn. Các bạn sẽ dùng hai ngón cái này, các bạn sẽ giữ về cái phần này cho mình. Đây, giữ vào. Tiếp theo là hai ngón trỏ này các bạn. Đây, sẽ đưa ra về phía dưới nè. Mình sẽ đưa ra. Các bạn sẽ ép vào, ép hai phần giấy này vào để nó vô được cái phần nếp và các bạn sẽ nhét cái phần giấy này lại cho mình. Đấy, nhét lại. Và cái phần giấy ở trên này nè, các bạn sẽ ép xuống phía dưới luôn nha. Đấy, bạn sẽ ép xuống phía dưới. Đây, thì các bạn sẽ ép xuống phía dưới như thế này cho mình nha. Như thế này. Tiếp theo thì các bạn sẽ gấp cái tờ giấy này vào trong nè. Các bạn sẽ gấp vào trong. Thì cho cái đường này nè các bạn, nó sẽ trùng với lại cái nếp gấp ở giữa này. Đây, cái đường này nó sẽ trùng với lại cái phần ở giữa này này. Các bạn sẽ gấp lại cho mình nha. Đây, các bạn sẽ miết lại cho mình. Các bạn sẽ miết cái phần đây lại nè. Miết lại cho mình. Đấy. Các bạn sẽ miết cái phần giấy này cho nó thẳng để giúp mình nha. Giữa này này. Các bạn sẽ gấp lại cho mình nha. Đây, các bạn sẽ miết lại cho mình. Các bạn sẽ miết cái phần đây lại nè. Miết lại cho mình. Đấy. Các bạn sẽ